What's up, guys? 2-1 yesterday with those three baseball plays. Cincinnati Reds did not get there. Tampa, maybe a first five inning would have been a little bit better, although it's still won. But that they were winning 9-3 in like the fifth inning or something like that, and give up 3 runs, and it got way closer. But they were able to still hold off the Mets and win that game and cover the run line as well. So that one got there, and the under in whatever game it was. What was the game I was on the under in? San Diego and Arizona. That got a little dicey, man. Arizona was almost completely blanked in the game, but San Diego put up 7 runs over the course of 2 innings in the middle of the game there in I think the 4th and 5th or 3rd and 4th or something like that. 4th and 5th, I think. All of a sudden it's a 7-0 game. I'm like, oh God, like the game was on the verge of it going over with Arizona not even scoring any runs. For a game to go over, typically you do need both teams to score. I was like, oh, come on, man. You're going to have one team just put this thing over, but it wound up not happening. It stayed under the 8.5 or the 9 if you're able to get the 9, because the market actually moved the total back up a little bit. After my video, it got up to 9, like shortly after that. I'm like, oh, crap. All right, but it's still, I don't know. I trust the handicapping on some of these pitching matchups, and the under still got there. San Diego on their side, Cease did his part, but even on Arizona's side, I don't think Ciccone was really that bad. Like when San Diego had 7 runs, they had 6 hits at that point. So in the game, there were only 7 total hits in the game at that point, 6 for San Diego and 1 for Arizona, and it was basically about to go over the total already with that few hits. That would have been bad luck, but it got there. All right, move on to today. Let's go. Oh, and congratulations to the Dallas Mavericks, who I believe won last night, right, in advance. Should have taken that one. I should stick with my my gut here. I thought that was a good spot. These teams in like closeout situations actually tend to be a pretty decent bet. The road underdogs actually do too, which was the case for Cleveland, but Cleveland, I believe, did not get there. Orlando won, and I think Orlando covered as well, right? So that's going to a game 7. So the Celtics still don't know who their opponent is going to be. And then what else do we have? In hockey, did Vancouver win? I think they might have. Congratulations to the Vancouver Canucks. If that is the case, I believe they won against Nashville. Unfortunate for Nashville, who actually played well enough, I think, to win that series, I would say. Just could not get it done. I think that game came right down to the end, and it was a 1-0 game or something like that. And I do think that the Vegas Knights extended their series to a game 7, right? I think they won last night against Dallas. Crazy stuff. All right, move on to today. NHL. There's only one NHL game today. Oh, God. This is the Boston Bruins in Toronto. My Bruins. Game 7. Didn't want it to get there, although I said after they lost as soon as they were up 3-1, I was like, this is a repeat of last year. Last year, they were up 3-1. They got complacent. Everybody was saying the series was over. And then that was it. They got so complacent that they just started playing like ass. And this year, it's been the offense has just been awful for the Bruins in the last 2 games. In the most recent game, so they lost game 5. They went back to Toronto. All right, let's go. Let's bounce back. You lost that first game. That's going to cause you to refocus, right? And in game 6, the Bruins actually shot up to like a minus 130 road favorite. So there was some money coming in on the Bruins. No, they played one of the worst offensive games probably any hockey team has ever played in history through the first more than half of the game. It was more than halfway through the second period, and the Bruins only had 1 shot on goal at that point in the game. Like, I don't even understand that. I don't even understand how that's possible to have 1 shot on goal in more than half of an NHL game. I don't know if it's ever happened before. Like, that is just unbelievably pitiful offense. The Bruins, they're going to have to bounce back here, man. Come on. I mean, I don't have any confidence, even though the market does have some indicators on the Bruins side here. They're conflicting indicators. I don't know. Bruins down from minus 143 to minus 136 on the money line. 62% of the tickets on them, 71% of the cash. They do have the cash discrepancy, it looks like, even though the line's gone down on them. I mean, this is now down to a single game elimination. I don't know if I trust the Bruins, man, even though the Bruins had Toronto's number this season. They were 4-0 against them during the regular season. So now it's the Bruins are 7-3 against them overall. I just don't even know what to think about this. It is a game 7, so the under might be a way to look. But the games have been low scoring in the series the last couple of times, so I don't know if I would even want to do that. It's a pretty short total at 5.5, juice to the under right now, but it does look like 85% of the tickets on the under, 98% of the cash on the under. Unders do tend to be the way to look in these elimination games, but I don't know. Even in game sixes, I think, although I mentioned in the NBA, I think games 5 and 7 in tied series are stronger for unders, but even in game sixes that are 3-2 series, tend to want to look towards the under. So I don't know if there's anything I'm going to do about that hockey game. I'm obviously not going to play it. I will actually play the NBA game, though, as the second round gets underway. We don't even know who some of the first round winners are going to be, but in the Western Conference here, the second round matchup is already starting here between Minnesota and Denver. The market indicators are against like where I would lean in both the side and the total here, man. So it's I don't know about that. It makes no sense to me. The Nuggets are down from 5 to 4.5 as a home favorite. 61% of the tickets on them, only 58% of the cash. And so it does look like the Nuggets are a bit public, although I kind of thought that they would be less public than that. It looks like the cash discrepancy and the line movement is actually slightly against them, and the total is dropped from 209 to 208.5, juice to the over, so very slight movement down on the total. 85% of the tickets on the over, not surprising there. The public wants to come in the over, but 96% of the cash on the over, so it actually looks like the cash discrepancy is actually on the over, even though the line's ticked down a little bit. In a situation like this, I mean, both teams are somewhat rested at this point. They both actually are pretty good defensively, especially Minnesota. Game one, you kind of expect the tendency to be for this game to be more of a lower scoring game and go under. So that's the way I would lean on the total there, although that's not going to be my play. I do tend to lean to the under in that one a little bit just for those reasons. Although I think the under is also maybe slightly correlated to taking the T-Wolves to cover the spread, because it might mean the points are worth a little bit more. Although in basketball, I mean, it's a very high-scoring game, so those they're less correlated than they are in other sports. The under with the underdog covering those points, but the T-Wolves are more of a defensive team than an offensive team. However, I like the Nuggets in this game, and I think the Nuggets are balanced, man. I mean, they're good on both sides. Even if the T-Wolves are the better defensive team, I don't think it's by that much, and the Nuggets are the better offensive team. And the Nuggets have the experience factor, man. I mean, I think I like a lot of what's going on here for the Nuggets side here. The experience factor, I think, certainly matters. The Nuggets have been here before. They've done that. And I think what we saw in the last series might actually be giving us a little bit of value on the Nuggets, which is why I'm surprised the public is actually as heavy as they are on the Nuggets, because I see people thinking, oh, this is going to be a close series. This is dangerous for the Nuggets. People liking the T-Wolves. The T-Wolves haven't lost yet in the playoffs, man. They just swept the Phoenix Suns. Yeah, but I mean, the Suns, I don't know what to say about the Suns, man. I mean, they are an aging team. They really lack depth. I've talked about how they have those 3 like stars on their team, and beyond that, they don't really have that much. T-Wolves had their number for sure. The T-Wolves looked a lot better in that first series than the Nuggets did, which I think is a little bit misleading. I mean, the T-Wolves were ready for that series. Game 1 set up very nicely for them. Phoenix really just kind of caved and just didn't show up once they fell down. They got like kind of punched in the mouth and just never came back, really. That's not going to happen this time around. People look at the Nuggets series and think the Nuggets struggled against the Lakers, man. The Lakers played such a good series against them. I mean, did they? I mean, the Nuggets won 4 out of 5 of the games. It could have been a sweep, really. The Lakers did have leads in a bunch of those games. So, yeah, but I think the Nuggets, like in a lot of cases, just kind of took the Lakers lightly because they'd won against them so many times in a row. I don't think that's going to happen this time, man. The Nuggets, even though it is LeBron, I do think they took the Lakers a little bit lightly because at one point they'd won 11 games in a row against them, which was going into the game they actually lost against LA. And I thought that game would refocus them, and it kind of didn't. But the refs really kind of came in and hurt the Nuggets in game 5 there. Like, really, the free throw discrepancy was extremely lopsided in favor of the Lakers there, which shows to me that I think there was some biased reffing involved there. And then looking at the regular season, these teams, they're 2-2 against each other this season, which I think each team split 1-1 at home. So each team was 1-1 in their own venues here. However, if you look at this, Jamal Murray was out in the second loss for Denver. So that most recent game where Denver lost to Minnesota pretty badly at home, Murray did not play in that game for Denver. So I don't know if there's that much you can take away from that one. And then Denver beat them in the most recent game on April 10th. And there was just an early season game where I think the teams were basically both intact, where Minnesota won easily. And then Denver also beat them in March, which I actually think was probably during Towns' injury. So Towns probably didn't play in that one. Yeah, that's correct. So Towns didn't play in one of the Denver wins. So I guess I mean, that kind of makes it look like a toss-up, I guess, because each team kind of had an injury going on in one of their losses to the opponent here. So that, again, makes it look like it's kind of a closer series. But I don't know, man. I think experience is going to loom large. And I think what we saw out of that first series is going to influence people a little bit, maybe too much. So I like the Nuggets in this one. I will lay the 4.5. I mean, I think you can get it at like reduced juice as well. It's a game one, a new series, and the Nuggets, like I said, experience. They're the more balanced team as well, and they might finally refocus after they did not play that well, after they at least didn't look that great against the Lakers. But to me, I just think the Nuggets, just like, we can win this series easily, and they just didn't really turn it on yet, whereas the T-Wolves played almost a perfect series against Phoenix, and I don't really think that that's going to totally continue. And I think the T-Wolves have had a little bit of extra time off, too, because of that. Not too much, because the Nuggets only went 5 games. Like, you're going to see a more extreme situation with, like, the Celtics now having to play against whatever team wins the game 7 there, probably Cleveland. But when you get into these, like, second rounds, I actually think that team that you think is more rested, it actually starts turning into rust if they've been off for too long. Like, that rest, becomes rust, and it's actually not an advantage anymore, whereas that team that just won that series that went longer, they actually have more momentum and are continuing that momentum, and it's actually better for them to be continuing to play rather than having that time off, which also can kind of like stop your momentum if you just won that series. Having an extra time off doesn't really help. Although in this series, I don't think it's that much. I think Denver only has I think Minnesota, only has slightly extra time off, but I still think that might even be another slight advantage to the Nuggets. So I like the Nuggets. We'll move on to Major League Baseball here. I will mention we do have in Major League Baseball, we have Tobias Myers going for Milwaukee. So I do kind of like that. I mean, it's one of those situations where it's a guy who's never been seen before by the opposing hitters. He's a good, talented, young pitcher, which is going to be the case in both games I'm actually having plays on here. Tobias Myers, I do somewhat lean to the Milwaukee side there, but Jameson Taillon, even though he's been seen before by Milwaukee quite a bit, he does have pretty good numbers off of them too. So I might lean to the under in that one more than anything, but it does look like the cash discrepancy in that one is actually on the over. It does look like the line has moved a little bit against the public Cubs going towards Milwaukee, even though I do see the Cubs also with the cash discrepancy there. So it's a little bit hard to read in that one. And then I do have a slight lean to the under in the San Francisco Philly game as well, with Keaton Winn almost having never been seen before by Philly and having pretty good stats on the season so far. Ranger Suarez has been proving me wrong. Like, his career numbers are not really that good, but his numbers this season are all very, very good, including his strikeout numbers, strikeout walk numbers, all very good for Suarez this year. So it does look like the under would be the right side in that one, even though the cash discrepancy is slightly against it in that one. The line has moved down quite a bit from 7.5 juice to the over down to 7 juice to the over. Moved down a decent amount. So I kind of like the under in that San Francisco Philly game. And I also lean to the over in the St. Louis Chicago White Sox game. People are going to look at this and think, like, the White Sox can't score, man. Like, I don't think the public is rushing in to take the over in that one. Although it does look like the under actually has more of the tickets, with the over has more of the cash there. So that would give me a little bit of, so that actually is in agreement with me, So it looks like the cash discrepancy. So somehow the under actually looks a little bit public, and the over actually has the cash and is moving up a little bit to over 8 juiced a little bit. So I actually like the over in that one. Eric Fedde, he's pitching really well this year, but over, based on his career stats, I don't think that's that he's going to be able to sustain that at all. I don't think it's sustainable. And then he doesn't have good numbers against the Cardinals. Lance Lynn, on the other hand, has an ERA that makes him look better than he is. His whip is terrible this year. So his ERA is misleading. He hasn't been that good this year. He's old. I mean, I don't think either of those pitchers are very young at this point. And Lynn doesn't have good numbers against these White Sox hitters either. It's actually one of Lynn's former teams, the Chicago White Sox, but it's been a while since he's been on that team. So any motivation from, this is the team that like let me go or whatever, that's long gone at this point. Lynn has bad numbers against them too. So I like the over in that one. And it was a very low scoring game yesterday. The kind of issue that I have with that one a little bit would be that I'm a little bit worried about the White Sox and not being able to hold up their end of the offensive bargain there, but also the team's bullpens are pretty intact after yesterday's game. Neither team had to use their bullpen that much, although I'm going to kind of go against what I think about that in a minute here. Actually, will I? I don't know, because I haven't played the other game yet, and I'm kind of thinking about this. I could see going multiple different directions here. So let's think about that for a minute. So one game I'm going to be on here, though, is I'm going to go against what I see in the market again here as far as the percentages. I'm going to play on the Pittsburgh Pirates, man. And I think laying the 1.5 run line, it's got to be the way that you go here, because this is they're a big favorite, up from minus 185 to minus 195. So it does look like there is some cash pushing the Pirates up a bit. 78% of the tickets on them, but only 71% of the cash. That does worry me a little bit. Pittsburgh hasn't been playing as well recently. I mean, they had a hot start to the season, and then they crashed back down to earth. They're not a very good team, but they are playing Colorado, who is an even worse team, and is one of the worst teams in baseball. So I think it's a good spot for Pittsburgh to bounce back. I mean, they returned home from a road trip in last night's game, and it was a bad spot for Pittsburgh, and they played a pretty ugly game and lost 3-2 to this Colorado team. So I think that sets up a good bounce back spot. When you have a team that returned home from a road trip, bad, distracted spot, and they just didn't play well in that game. They lost to a bad team like Colorado. In the case of Pittsburgh here, it tends to be a nice bounce back spot for them in that second game back, because now they're back home. They've gotten that home stuff, the stuff you got to do at home, out of the way. You played bad in that first game, and now you tend to refocus and you put in a better performance in that second game. So that sets up a good situational spot for Pittsburgh. And I think the pitching matchup, I mean, it's Jared Jones, man. You know what I do. Jared Jones, as soon as I see that he's the pitcher, I'm jumping in some way on this one, man. Jared Jones, people are starting to catch on to him, though. He's got a 3.18 ERA, 0.91 whip in his only season in the majors so far. 42-5 strikeout walk ratio in 34 innings, 26 hits allowed. So very, very high strikeout rate, very good strikeout walk numbers. He's just excellent, and Colorado's hitters have never seen him before, so that's an advantage to him as well, where Colorado, their offense, I don't think is that great to begin with, and they're going to be facing this young gun in Jones, who has good stuff and is a guy that they've never seen before. And he might be like headed towards like rookie of the year type of stuff or whatever, man, because he's been one of these young guys I like jumping in, and he's been probably the best one this season so far and the most consistent one. On the other side, Austin Gomber, he's got a 4.5 ERA. Austin Gomber, I don't know, a 1.34 whip is kind of high, man. I mean, that's indicative of his ERA. Maybe it should be a little bit even higher than it is. He's got a 22-11 strikeout walk ratio in 32 innings. That's not very good. His stats are just much, much worse than Jones's on the season. And versus Pittsburgh's hitters, they're 8 for 32 off him lifetime, which isn't that terrific, but he's got 11 strikeouts, 3 walks against them. It's a 250 batting average, so it's mediocre, and 752 OPS, which is just kind of mediocre as well. So no real advantage for Gomber, but that leads me to believe Jones has like a significant edge over him, where Pittsburgh has seen Gomber before. They've hit him okay, and Jones is the complete unknown quantity, plus being the better pitcher here. And then you look at what happened last night. I mean, Colorado had to use, I believe Jalen Beeks is now their closer. Former Red Sox pitcher Jalen Beeks, who I actually went to his major league debut for the Red Sox, which went very terribly for the Red Sox. He was not on the Red Sox very long. And the next night, I wound up doing karaoke with Jalen Beeks' parents in Boston, because they were in town for their son's debut. Very weird situation there. I'm like, oh, who's this old couple doing karaoke? That kind of rule. Oh, we're Jalen Beeks' parents. All right, sick. I was hanging out with a friend, or a couple of friends of mine. I think one of the friends who I went to the game with. Oh, man. Yeah, that was just a weird situation. So yeah, I got to do karaoke with Jalen Beeks' parents. I don't know where Jalen was. He was not there at that bar that night. But anyway, yeah, so Beeks came in, had to close out the game. So the Rockies used a couple of their back end of their bullpen. Pittsburgh did use 3 relievers instead of 2, but one of them was Stratton, who I think is kind of more of a guy who comes in and eats up some innings. So both bullpens are somewhat intact. Colorado did use a couple of their better relievers, actually, because they had to close out that game against Pittsburgh. So I don't think there's that much of an edge, really, in the bullpen situation there. So full game, I think it's fine. Well, in full game, because we're laying a price on the run line with the favorite. We want them to have the full 9 innings to be able to do this. So hopefully they've just won it in 8 innings. But then it kind of tends to be a little bit dangerous because you get that 8 innings, and then it's if they're up by 1, then they don't get that extra because they're at home. They don't get that 9th inning to try to pad the lead because the game's already over. So it's a little bit dangerous. But hopefully Pittsburgh's able to just win this by margin. I think they have a pretty serious advantage in that one. And then the other game that I like that I'm going to be on is going to be which way do I want to do this, man? Because I'm talking about Mets Tampa. Tampa's down from -130 to -113 on the money line here. Tampa won for me last night in their return home. They got 51% of the tickets are on the Mets. The public kind of liking the Mets still slightly, just because they have the better record. But the Mets lost yesterday. 72% of the cash on the side of the Mets, though. So the Mets have the cash discrepancy. The line is moving very much in favor of them. And then we see a lot of money coming in on the under as well. So I like the Mets side and the under here. It's just a matter of which one of these am I actually going to play. The under looks like the line opened at either 8.5 juice to the under or 8, and it's down to 7.5 juice to the under now, with 81% of the tickets on the under, 94% of the cash now on the under. Oh, man. The under, I mean, yesterday's game was incredibly high scoring. As I mentioned, Tampa wound up winning that game 10-8. After blowing a 9th or almost blowing a 9-3 lead, but not quite. Tampa had to use the back end of their bullpen, man, which scares me a little bit as far as the under is concerned, but they did use Armstrong, who's a guy that comes out of the starting rotation sometimes. So they used like 3 of their better relievers, really, and then so did the Mets. Well, the Mets actually used kind of like 1 or 2, really, because they used Nunez to eat up some innings after Quintana really had a bad start, giving up 10 hits in 2 2/3 and 8 runs, not going far into that game. But Mets actually kind of saved their bullpen to some extent, really. So that leads me to like the Mets in this game, man. And Tampa used a lot of their bullpen there. So, oh boy. All right. I actually think playing on the Mets actually might be the better play here, as we've lost a little bit of value on the total. Total seems like a little bit more dangerous. Oh boy. All right. I guess we will come in and play the Mets here instead. Which you can get in an underdog price still at +100. So I do like that. Whereas you could play, I don't mind if you play under 7 at under 7.5. I mean, at reduced juice. I do still lean to the under as well because Zach Littell has actually not have bad numbers this year against just in general, he doesn't have bad numbers this year, but the reason I like the Mets here, though, is Christian Scott is making his major league debut, man. He's one of the top prospects in the Mets organization. He's only 24 years old. He's a 6'4" right-hander, so he's a looming presence on the mound. And he's got a great fastball, man, and he's got good numbers recently in the minors. He's been striking out a high percentage of batters in the minors and not allowing many hits, has good ERA, good whip, very good strikeout numbers in the minors over recent stretch that he's had in the minors there at both AA and AAA, I believe. So he seems to be ready. The Mets think he's ready. They're calling him up for his major league debut. And you know I like spots like this where it's a prospect who looks good in the minors, has really good stuff. The team likes him as a prospect. They're bringing him up. And, of course, he's never been seen before by these opposing hitters. So they're going to have to get used to what this guy throws. I think he's got a bit of like a rising fastball, and he's got a really high whiff rate on that fastball. He can get these hitters to swing and miss, man. He throws upwards of like 98 miles an hour on it, like high 90s. That looks good to me as well. I don't know what else he's got. I know he has like a slider, which I think is kind of his secondary pitch, although apparently the movement on it is like not terrific. But maybe he's got some other pitches involved in there too. But he's definitely a fastball first type of guy, which I guess is a little bit dangerous, but it seems to me like he has movement on that thing, and it's kind of an overpowering fastball with the strikeout numbers that he's got there. So I like all that. So I like Christian Scott, man. And he's going up against Zach Littell. Littell has good numbers this year, man, for sure. He's got a 35.5 strikeout walk rate in 33 innings. So that looks good for sure. Very good numbers, very good strikeout walk rate, good strikeout numbers, but he's allowed 40 hits in 33 innings. So his whip is 1.36. That gives me a little bit of hesitation. 3.27 ERA makes him look a little bit better than he actually is. He's decent. I mean, he's in his late 20s. I like his strikeout walk numbers for sure, and that's a good indicator. And he hasn't walked anybody in his last 3 starts, but look at who he's faced, man. Other than starting against Toronto, though their offense has been struggling this season too. They have a good offense. Other than that, he's faced Colorado, the Angels twice, Detroit, and he didn't do well in the Detroit game. And his strikeout walk numbers are good, but he allowed a lot of runs and did only okay in the Angels game, although also had good strikeout walk numbers there. And then he faced the White Sox. So he hasn't really faced great offenses so far. So I think that's improving his numbers a little bit. The 3.27 ERA should be a bit higher with a 1.36 whip. So even though he hasn't walked guys, his control has been really good. It seems like he's leaving it over the plate too much, and he's getting hit a bit. His career numbers aren't really that impressive. 4 ERA and 1.28 whip, only 260 strikeouts and 292 and 2/3. 77 walks is good. So his control has been pretty good. 3.4 strikeout walk ratio, but he's not like that much of a strikeout pitcher, really. A little bit less so than what he looks so far this year. And he's bounced around, man. And for almost his entire career, he was a reliever until Tampa Bay kind of turned him into a starter. And he's done decently in that role. He's had good strikeout walk numbers in that role, no question about that. And he's been very good against these Mets hitters too, but they've at least seen him before. They're 4 for 26 off him lifetime. He's got 5 strikeouts, no walks against him. Of course, that's kind of what he does. He's kept their hits way down, only allowing 4 hits off him. 4 for 26, 1 extra base hit, a double. So 154 batting average and 346 OPS off him. So I do like that. So that's why I kind of like the under in this one, but I like Christian Scott better, man. And Tampa Bay kind of wiped out their bullpen yesterday, and the Mets really kind of conserved theirs. And I think Littell, he's a little bit older. He's been seen before. He's been hittable. I think Christian Scott's the more unknown, and he's going to be the more unhittable pitcher. So I'm actually going to make this a play on the Mets at plus 100. I'll actually go that way with it, where I think Littell's numbers are a little bit misleading with his ERA because he hasn't allowed too many hits so far this season. So that's the way I'm going to do it, man. I'll play on the Mets. So my plays today are going to be on just taking these young pitchers. Pittsburgh Pirates minus 1.5 run line. Oh, God. You can get it plus 112. I think will be the way you can do it. I don't mind if you want to just throw it on the money line. It's minus 190, though, or minus 1 run line at minus 150. It's kind of getting pricey at that point, but if you want to do that, I don't mind it that much. And then on the New York Mets plus 100, I like them to maybe even bounce back after Tampa kind of used their best relievers. The Mets also, let's not forget, the Mets also have the better offense out of those two, and I think it's somewhat of a significant edge for the Mets there, having the better offense there too. And we'll play on the young pitchers in both of those spots, and the Denver Nuggets minus 4.5, which I think you can get at reduced juice. Let's get it. Peace. And I put out a Kentucky Derby video a little while ago with some suggestions there. No official plays there, but you kind of know what I like in the Derby. Peace out.